All right, so thank you for joining us for the Work Life Rocks virtual series at the University of Kentucky. Today's topic, we're talking about managing flex work and work life boundaries. So when we talk about managing flex work and work life boundaries, there's a few ways you can consider that. And I found this little quote that made me pause a little bit and think about it. And this quote says, balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. Balance means making choices and enjoying those choices. So, boundaries are essential for everyday life. I mean, we need boundaries in our work life, we need boundaries in our lives outside of work. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how boundaries can help us enjoy our life, basically. So, when you think about some keys to managing work life, with this particular series, Work Life Rocks, this is really an acronym: resilience, optimism, compassion, knowledge, and self care. Another way of thinking about that is resilient optimism leads to compassion, knowledge, and self care. So, work life rocks. And this little quote says, you will never feel truly satisfied by life until you feel truly I mean, sorry, you will never feel truly satisfied by work until you feel truly satisfied by life. Food for thought. So, in this session today, we'll be talking about the following items. We'll be talking about how you can manage your flex work schedule, also how you can maintain your work life boundaries, how you can communicate needs, expectations, and availability, how you can access your productivity and challenges, and of course, develop proactive solutions. So let's just kick it off by first of all talking very briefly about the types of flex work that we offer at the University of Kentucky. And depending on the type of flex work that you have, when you think about managing your schedule and setting boundaries, it will really depend on the type of flex work that you are participating in. So right now, a lot of us may be participating in remote work, and that's basically when you are working someplace other than your usual location, such as home. And then also we have the adjusted or flex schedule. That is basically working the same number of hours in a week, but you're adjusting those schedules from a regular time frame. So for example, if you normally work, say 8 to 5, you may have adjusted your schedule to work 9 to 6, or you may have even adjusted your schedule to work 7 to 4. And it may not be consistent in the full week. It may just be 1 or 2 days in a particular week where you've adjusted your hours. And it may not be consistent. It may be for a particular week you needed to adjust your hours. So that's what we mean by adjusting or flexing your schedule. Compressed work week, that's working the same number of hours in a week, but in a shorter time frame. So, for example, you may work the same number of hours that you would work in a 5 day week in 4 days or 4.5 days. So, one way to think about that, if you work 4 10-hour days, then that's covering your 40 hours versus stretching that over 5 days. Also, the reduced seasonal hours and then the reduced hours. Reduced seasonal hours is something that the university has offered for a while now, and that is where you can reduce your hours in two ways in typically summer season and winter season. And that is where you can either reduce your hours from like a full-time 1.0 to 0.75 or somewhere in between that. And then also there's an option to take a full week off without pay. And so those are two options for the reduced seasonal. That typically ends in the summer, like middle of August. But this year we have extended the reduced seasonal hours option to go through December 31st. So if you're looking for a flex option where you can reduce your hours, you might consider that through this year. And then also the reduced hours, that's where there's a different reasons to reduce hours. That is usually a departmental level determination. And so that's something to think about as well. All right. So when you think about managing flex work schedule, there's a lot of things to keep in mind here. Again, keeping in mind what type of flex work you are working in, it's going to look different. So One, you want to create a consistent routine and a workable schedule. And I really like this word workable because this is letting you know that you are empowered to try to figure out what schedule makes sense for you. Although you may be trying to create a very systematic, very structured schedule, you also might need to be considering what makes sense for you and your household and what's happening in your world. Also thinking about what makes sense for your department. So as you think about a workable schedule, this is something you can actually do, is what I mean by that. So for example, if you are currently managing children at home that's doing virtual schooling, then you need to really think about what makes sense for you. So for example, maybe normally you can work 8 to 5 straight through, no problem, no big deal. But in this current climate, you may feel that you need to stop for an hour or two here and there in the middle of the day, or two or four, 3 or 4 30-minute breaks just to assist a child with some work. So that's where you can talk to your supervisor and say, okay, I can start at 7 and I can go from 7 to 9 straight, but then I'm going to need to take a break from 9 to 10 and I can pick right back up from 10 to 12, that type of thing. So that's what I mean by a workable schedule. And then also consider you're going to have disruptions, you're going to have distractions, and you really need to figure out your workflow. And also keeping in mind that your work schedule is going to potentially impact your team. So that's where you got to think about the workflow. Make sure everyone knows your schedule. Make sure your work team knows your schedule. Make sure, of course, obviously your supervisor and your family, the people that's in the home with you, especially if you're working remotely, even if they're not there all the time, they need to know when you're available and when you're not available. Consider your capacity and prioritize your work and reprioritize as needed. And then consider again how your schedule impacts your team. So, although you are creating a workable schedule and you're trying to create a routine that makes sense for you, you also have to think about your team. And, like, for example, if you have team meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock, then you want to maybe try to make sure you are available at 2 o'clock on those days. That is probably not the time that you're going to say, I'm not available. So that's just something what I mean by keeping in mind that your schedule impacts your team as well. And then also managing your task projects expectations, using technology. This is just, again, thinking about flexible work schedule, how to make that work for you. Super important to figure out how you're going to manage your tasks and projects, how you're going to collaborate with your colleagues in your department, across campus, across the university, across the state, or wherever, whoever you might be collaborating with. Figure out what's a good time for everyone to meet, a schedule that makes sense for everyone, how you can share project updates, what technology resources can you use to make that easy. For example, MS Teams has a great, teamwork platform. Are you using that? Are you using OneDrive? Are you using something else to share documents, for example? So just think about just because you're flexing your schedule does not mean that you're suddenly not available. It does not mean that you're suddenly, you know, can't meet deadlines and things like that. That is not what it means. It just means that you have to be a little creative and proactive and consider how you're going to get the work done. And then, of course, be accountable and follow through. Everyone, we all love people that follow through what they say they're going to do. If you realize that you're running up against a deadline, and let's just say you've had one of those work-life schedule disruptions, and you're not going to be able to meet a deadline, or maybe it's a soft deadline, or maybe you need to ask for an extension. Just do that. Be proactive about that. And then, of course, consider quality over quantity. It is very tempting to try to do as much work. Let's say you're in a remote work scenario, for example. It's very tempting to try to do as much work quantity wise as you maybe would have done in an uninterrupted, no distracted workplace. And then if you're working from home and you now have distractions and you have different things you're going to have to stop and work on, and so forth, it's easy to try to do that same volume of work, and then you add unnecessary stress to yourself. And what you may need to do is just kind of prioritize some projects or prioritize your task, and see how you can help yourself in that way. All right. So let's transition and talk about boundaries. So for the majority, almost the rest of this presentation, we're going to be talking about boundaries because boundaries is a really big topic and it's something that we all can kind of polish a little bit. Even if you say, I'm really good at keeping boundaries, I know exactly what they are. I know what my triggers are for not keeping my boundaries. I know how to do it in a very nice, kind way. That type of thing. You may be that person and that's fantastic. So we're going to take some time to just talk a little bit about boundaries. First of all, what are they? You know, boundaries are guidelines, rules, limits that we create that helps us identify for people and ourselves kind of what's permissible. You know, what do we want? What are our expectations? What do we need from others? What do we need from ourselves? And then also when you talk about creating healthy boundaries, it's very empowering. It really does empower you. You feel like, I am so confident. I mean, you feel great when you know that you have some healthy boundaries in place because they protect your self-esteem, they protect your heart, they protect your respect, they respect your self-respect, and they help you to enjoy healthy relationships. So why set boundaries? There's a lot of reasons why we should set boundaries. First of all, personal boundaries help us decide what types of communications, behavior, and interactions are acceptable. That's really, really important. They help you also not to feel resentful and angry towards people. They help you not to be whining and complaining about something because things aren't going your way or you're not happy about something because you have had a boundary crossed. So if you set boundaries, it helps you not to find yourself there a lot. Also, boundaries help us to take care of ourselves, which is very, very important. You think about practicing self care and the fact that that's essential and it's necessary, and self care is something we have to do every day, all day. Boundaries help us to do that. Also, it helps us communicate what we need in work situations. It help us to, they help us to communicate well with others and even accept and know others' well being. They help us to be kind and gentle and present. I like the word present because sometimes if your boundaries being crossed, you may not be present. You may not be engaged. You may just be there. Let's say you're in a meeting or you're in some sort of a work situation and you really don't want to be there because the boundary has been crossed. And therefore, you're not as present as you could be. You're not contributing the way you could be. So they help us to continue to contribute in the most effective way. They put people in right place and right positions in our lives. And so when I think about this boundary setting, everyone is not going to be your best friend. Everyone is not going to be your best bud. Some people are just going to be nice people that you talk to at work, and that's it. And that's okay. And so boundaries help us to kind of know what to expect from different people and different types of relationships. And then back to not resenting people. They help us not to resent people. They help us not to resent our jobs and help us not to resent our families. Because let's just say families have crossed boundaries. It may be people in the house with you, it may be people that's not in the house with you, that they're crossing boundaries. And if you can set some boundaries with them, it helps you not to resent them. And let's face it, we all want to have healthy relationships with our colleagues as well as our family members, and we really don't want to be resenting them. But sometimes we have those feelings because a boundary has been crossed or we never set a boundary to begin with. And because of that, the person is doing whatever they're doing, and they may very well be unknowingly crossing a boundary, but you've never let them know that. So this just reminds us that. Also, it lets people truly see us and know us. When I think about truly seeing us, I think about the fact that nobody's perfect. We all want to choose authenticity. We all want to be truly who we are every day. And so, if you are setting some healthy boundaries in your relationships, work, and life, you can be honest about things. If things aren't going well, you can say that. You don't feel like you have to be perfect. You don't feel like you have to, meet this unrealistic expectation. So there's all types of boundaries. There's physical, kind of like that, not too close. There's the emotional boundaries, intellectual, that's work. And then there's barriers. What are some barriers? Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes we don't set boundaries because we have fear. Like, what will happen if I say this? How will this person respond if I tell them I don't like when they do that? Sometimes you have guilt, anxiety, lack of knowledge. You just simply don't know how to do it. You don't know how to start that conversation. You don't know that maybe the pattern of behavior has been going for so long. At this point, you're thinking like, how do I even stop that? Like, how do I intercede? How do I even make that different? And I've been letting this happen for so long. Or for example, real life type of thing. Let's just say some people email you all times of the night, and because for so long you have been answering emails at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night, and now you're like, you feel obligated to do that because you've been doing it for so long. And you now are going, well, how do I stop that? So that's a barrier. And that could be built in some fear and little anxiety. And then here's some tips for setting healthy boundaries. First of all, communicate clearly with respect and calm and few words. I like the few words piece because sometimes when we say too much, we overstate, and then we even start to back out of the point we need to make. So just be respectful and calm and state what you need. And then listen. Maybe the person will say, I had no idea I was doing that, or I had no idea you needed that. Absolutely, I'd be happy to help you with that or happy to do that. But you haven't stated it. So don't justify, don't get angry, don't apologize for sending six mixed messages. This is one thing that catches a lot of people, sending mixed messages. Saying one thing, saying, oh yeah, I'm not going to answer emails after 6 o'clock, and then answer emails after 6 o'clock. So if you find yourself sending those mixed messages, stop doing that. Draft is your friend. Draft emails are your friend. Let's just say you are that person that you really don't mind doing a little work, or you got a couple of hours and you're doing something later, or 1 hour, or what have you. Maybe don't send the message right then and there. Answer it, put it in a draft folder, send it first thing in the morning. That's something to consider. Keep in mind, setting healthy boundaries, it really does take practice. It really takes some determination, and it can be challenging. It's not necessarily super easy thing to do, especially depending on the hierarchy of the relationship. If this is a supervisor you having to approach with some boundaries, you may feel a little nervous about that. If it's a peer, even if it's somebody that's been there for years and they are stuck in a pattern of doing things and you're like, let's try something different, or that way doesn't work for me, or what have you, it does require some determination. You might be nervous, but the encouragement here is to do it anyway. Do it anyway, because again, you don't want to be resentful towards them. You don't want to feel angry. You don't want to see them coming and want to go the other way because you haven't set healthy boundaries. And it is a process, but it does take time, but you can do it. All right. So here's some questions just to think about. When it comes to your workload, what's reasonable to complete in one day? And of course, that might depend on what you're working on that particular day. What has to get done first? What can you control? And your self-care. Is your self-care essential to you personally? Like, are you really making your self-care essential? Are you doing something for self-care every day, all day? What type of self-care things are you participating in? Things towards your physical health, mental health, emotional health. Also think about connections with colleagues. Is your routine working? Is your schedule working? Are you completely stressed out and anxious because you are trying to stick with a schedule that truly is not working for you? Remember, we talked about workable schedules. Are you communicating what you need? Because you really can't hold people accountable if we haven't communicated what we need. And then think about life and family. Is your work schedule clear to your family? Do they know what you're working on and how much time you need to work on it? Sometimes you may have to just communicate that. Do they know this is your workspace? Do not enter. Do they know these are your work supplies? Do not use them. That type of thing. Or is everybody using everything all the time? That may not be helping you with creating some healthy boundaries. All right. So here's some top 10 signs that you lack personal boundaries. So just listen to these and think to yourself, are you saying yes or no to these? Number one, you fail to speak up when mistreated. Number two, you give away too much of your time. Number three, you agree when you actually feel like disagreeing. Number four, you feel guilty for dedicating time to yourself. Number five, You feel taken for granted by others. Number 6, you have toxic relationships. Number 7, you have chronic fear about what others think of you. Number 8, you overshare details about your life with others. Number 9, you constantly feel like the victim. Number 10, you attract people who try to control or dominate you. Now, again, these were 10 signs that you lack personal boundaries. As I read through those, some of them may have spoken to you loud and clear, and others may have been, you may have felt like, I'm working on that, I'm getting better at that. So, this is just something to think about personal boundaries. So, let's transition on to our needs and expectations. When it comes to our work life flexible schedules as well as our boundaries, first of all, know yourself and know your limits and communicate that. Be as organized as possible, yet flexible. And that almost probably sounds like two opposites, but it's not. Be organized in terms of your workspace and what you're working on, and have notebooks that you need, or have files that you need, that kind of thing. Have a schedule. Have a calendar that you use to organize upcoming meetings, activities, projects, so forth and so on. But also be flexible, because flexibility is our friend. And then also, just because thing in life is unpredictable sometimes. So if you're too organized, to the point of you can't adjust as needed, that's going to cause you some stress and anxiety. So keep in mind, it's great to have a plan, but also be willing to flex the plan as needed. Create realistic timelines. Use your resources. Your resources could be people, it could be technology, just whatever resources will help you to do a good job and to manage things for yourself and to set healthy boundaries. That's what you need to use. Create a routine and adjust as you go. And I love this week by week, because you may truly find yourself in a position where you are adjusting your schedule week by week. You may have a sort of routine. You may start your day at 8 o'clock every day and end roughly around 5 or 6, let's just say. But you may find what you do within that time frame varies from week to week. And depending on where you work and what you do, you may find, depending on what's happening in your work schedule and your work life, whatever season you're in, you may find that you have a flexible routine, and you may find your weeks look very different. And that's fine. That's fine. Set and maintain limits as far as emails, phone calls. Say no to some things. And no sometimes may not mean no forever. It may mean no right now. So sometimes you may have to say, I would love to participate in that, but I need to table this until next time. Or can I come to your presentation or your meeting like in a month or in a week? Or can I send you some resources about this topic? What have you? Sometimes you just have to set some limits. And as far as that email limit goes, maybe, for example, the email limit may be don't check emails after you get off work. Even if that means you stop at 5, you stop at 6, you stop at 7. Don't check emails until the next day. Phone calls, maybe you limit phone calls after work related, especially after a certain time, or even family. I mean, you can set your phone up to where calls won't even get through after a certain time. So maybe you have a limit to calls not getting through after midnight, and they can pick back up at 6 in the morning. And maybe you have a certain number of calls, immediate family members, something that can get through. So that's something to think about as well. All right, let go of normal, let go of usual, let go of always, because this is a great season to redefine success and redefine progress. Because when you think about boundary setting, you think about work life management and keeping things together. Sometimes the thing that can hurt us is trying to do normal and trying to do what we always do. And this may not be a season for that, and it's okay. So give yourself permission to just do things differently. Give yourself permission to redefine what success means for your life and for your work, in progress. Maybe you usually can get certain things done in a lesser time frame, or differently, using different tools even. Say it's okay to use MS Teams for example. And it's okay to use Zoom. It's okay to use, whatever resources. OneDrive. I started using OneDrive a lot when I started working remotely. I wasn't using it that much before. So that was me kind of letting go of some of what I normally would use to use something different to make my work effective. And then have self compassion and grace. So very important. We must tell ourselves it's okay. The compassion that you would share with your colleagues, give yourself some of that compassion. The grace that you would give to a parent or a child or neighbor or, the person in the grocery store, give the same grace to yourself. Sometimes we are so much harder on ourselves than we are on other people. So this just reminds us it's okay to be human. It's okay to give yourself a break, basically. Okay, productivity. So be aware of the comparison trap. I love talking about the comparison trap because the comparison trap surfaces in every aspect of our lives. It surfaces whether you're a parent, whether you're a grandparent. It surfaces in your work. If you're working with certain colleagues, people doing similar work, or this person's getting their work done quicker than you, or whatever, the comparison trap shows up everywhere. So just be aware of the comparison trap when you're trying to get your work done, especially if things are different in your world right now, in your life right now. Again, if you have children virtually schooling or elderly family members that you're taking care of, or whatever you might be doing, be aware that the comparison trap is out there and you can stop it. All right. Deal with your feelings. If you're feeling resentment, if you're feeling upset, angry, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling weary, whatever you may be feeling, deal with that. There's some wonderful therapists in the Office of Work Life, and there's other therapists that you can take, talk to. Maybe you just need to talk to a friend, a buddy, a colleague, talk to someone. Just deal with the feelings when they come up. Maybe ask yourself, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this way? Or I've felt this way 3 times this week. What is happening? Or I feel this way every time I talk to this particular person. What is this about? Sometimes deal with that feeling will help you to just find some freedom. Be proactive, share your challenges with your colleagues, whoever you can share it with, your supervisor specifically. If you're trying to set some boundaries, you may not want to share too many details, but you may be fine sharing, this is what my life looks like right now, and I just need a little flexibility. And just talk about that and be as proactive as you can. Engage in collaborative work, savor your successes and your milestones. Like, don't be so caught in the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, that you forget to pause and say, wow, that was great. That program was great, or that meeting was great, or that project was so smooth, or we figured out whatever. Just pause and enjoy that success, enjoy that moment. All right, so this is pretty much our last slide as we talked about proactive solutions, and I'm gonna skim through this a bit. But when you think about proactive solutions, think about monitoring your projects and your bandwidth. A lot of this we've talked about, keeping in mind, adjusting your workload and timeline, set realistic plans and goals, reprioritize as needed, reevaluate, be willing to backtrack. And this is something you don't hear too often. Be willing to backtrack, be willing to let things go. You may, again, back to the get rid of, be okay with saying no, or not thinking about things in a normal way or a usual way, or we always do it this way. There may be some things you need to let go of. There may be some things you need to start over. So it's okay to pause and evaluate things and figure out, is this working? Is this worth it? Is this effective? If not, should we keep doing this? Is this causing somebody extra work? Is this causing me extra work unnecessarily? And we don't need to do this process because this process is not effective. Or there's a shorter, quicker, smarter way to do this. Let's go with that. And that's perfectly fine. So that's being proactive. Block time on your work schedule and think about doing one thing at a time. And I know, me personally, I find that hard to do. I find it hard to do one thing at a time. Whenever I do one thing at a time, I'm really productive. And that may just mean an hour and a half of working on one presentation, and just do that. Don't look at emails. Don't, when I say having a hard time with that, sometimes I'll pause and I'll go check an email, and then I'll see an email from someone asking for something. And it's like, oh, that's really quick. I can pull that up and send that to them real quick. And there you go. 20 minutes later, I've done that and two, three other things when I really should have just stayed focused on that one thing and worked on it for an hour, hour and a half, and got it done or got it to a stopping place. So it's really easy to get pulled into these multitasking sometimes, in maybe not the best idea. Stay connected with your colleagues, with your supervisor. Use your resources to do that. Always find a way to lighten the mood, to use humor. Use your meetings effectively. If you're in a meeting, use maybe the beginning, the end, or middle of that time to talk about how people are doing, to catch up a little bit. And then if you need some solutions, maybe you are trying to figure out how to balance things and how to maintain some priorities, how to have some boundaries. Maybe, think about some things, write some things down, and then go have a conversation with your supervisor and say, here's what I was thinking. If we changed my schedule to be this, and this, or if I did this only on these days, or, think about some possible solutions and then have a meeting and just talk through that. That's just one great way to be proactive when you talk about solutions. And of course, maintain self-care because it's necessary. Don't brush off your fears and your worries. When we talk about self-care, we are so good at sometimes putting on that smiley face. And I don't know if you guys have seen those different commercials where they show the person walking around and they have this little smiley face that they hold up when the person says hi, and then they put it down, but they're really sad underneath there. So we don't want you to be that way. We understand that there are times when you have to just kind of step up and do what you have to do. But also, we talked about monitoring our feelings, monitoring what's going on with you, and then find some time to talk to someone, get some help. Process through that, because it really can ultimately just steal your joy, and so you don't want that. Always keeping in mind the growth mindset and how to reframe things. The growth mindset is pretty much that mindset that says, okay, this is different, this is new, but I can do it. This is a new process, but I guess I'll work on it. I can get it. That's that growth mindset. It's like, it's new, it's different, it's a change, but maybe I can do it. Or at least being willing to try something before, and not just stopping before you even try a different approach or a different way to do something. Remember gratitude and grateful moments. It's even if you find yourself having a tough day or a tough moment, you might just want to pull out a piece of paper and just write 5 things you're grateful for, just to kind of reset your mind and reframe things for you. I'm grateful for these 5 things work related. I'm grateful for these 5 things in my life. And you'll be like, okay, all right, grateful moment. And then keeping in mind our real purposes, however you define it for yourself. Limit your work talk and your work time. Don't overcommit. We've talked about that. I love this point of asking for help and accepting help. Sometimes we've mastered asking for help. We may not necessarily have mastered accepting the help, though, especially if that means doing something a different way or using a different resource, or the layout's different, those kinds of things. So keep in mind, it's great to ask for help, and we should. But if we ask for help, we have to also be open to accepting the help. Okay? All right. And then it's great to have people that you can check in with. A buddy, check in with someone else, have somebody check in with you to see how things are going. And then also create a routine and separate and transition from work to home. That is something you probably have to think about. Whether that means, if you're working from home, your transition might be going for a walk. Your transition might be just simply turning everything off, or closing the door to a room that you normally work in, or putting things away. I mean, what transition thing can you do? Maybe it's watching something. Maybe it's reading something. Whatever you need to do to transition, think about how do you mentally and physically kind of transition. All right, boundaries. I have a set limit. I have to set limits for my own wellness. And even though I may say no to you, it doesn't mean it's even about you. I'm just taking care of me. I like this little quote. It's just, when you think about boundaries, which is what we've been talking about in this session today, we have to set limits for our own well-being. We really do. And we also give yourself permission to know that it's not about you trying to be mean or, disrespect for anything to anybody else. You just have to take care of yourself. And you may even have to communicate that to someone. That it's not about me trying to be mean to you or anything, but I do have to take care of myself. So, as always, in the Office of Work Life, we are always eager to assist our UK employees with your work life management needs. And as far as this series goes, we are looking forward to having some wonderful discussions. Have a great day.